In the early 18th century, information didn't travel on a grid. It arrived on the tide. For the colonial Atlantic world, the arrival of a ship meant an influx of the single most valuable currency available: news. This is the front page of the American Weekly Mercury, printed in Philadelphia, May 1721. A close read offers a reality check. Over 50 years before the Revolution, these dispatches show colonies actively managing their own continental diplomacy, armed conflict, and macroeconomics. Page 1 details high-stakes border negotiations held directly between the governors of Pennsylvania and Virginia. Turn the page, and you find a breaking report of a violent naval standoff and a political coup in South Carolina. And buried in the back, an advertisement reveals the establishment of localized financial infrastructure right here in Philadelphia. By 1721, these colonies operated as proactive, self-governing entities, resolving continental disputes on their own authority. The diplomatic record begins with two chief executives, Governor William Keith and Governor Alexander Spotswood. On the front page, Keith publishes a memorial to Spotswood, addressing an urgent crisis. Native alliances are conflicting across unregulated borders. To prevent war, Keith proposes a hard boundary. Neither group will cross the Potomac River nor the high ridge of mountains. This map illustrates Keith's proposal, drawing a line hundreds of miles long, tracing the Potomac River up through the Appalachian Mountains. This boundary segregates the territory, placing the Five Nations west of the ridge and Susquehanna Indigenous groups to the east. In 1721, this ridge was a massive physical barrier. It represented the absolute edge of the known landscape for European settlers. The Potomac River anchored the southern half of this natural dividing line, creating a formidable wall. Turning to page 52, we find Governor Spotswood's official response. He formally accepts Keith's boundary, stating the bounds proposed may serve as proper limits to ensure mutual friendship and security among their governments. This is a clear exercise of intercolonial sovereignty. Keith and Spotswood are managing vast territories and drafting treaties as autonomous regional powers. By bypassing London entirely and establishing their own continental borders alongside indigenous nations, these executives were cementing a localized geopolitical power structure that answered primarily to itself. The geopolitical treaties up north contrast sharply with the breaking domestic news of an armed rebellion further south. Page 53 details a violent regime change in Charlestown. Deposed Governor Johnson and Captain Hidefly leveraged the Flamborough man-of-war to threaten the town. In response, acting Governor Moore ordered drums to be beat, rallying the local militia to fortify the streets. The skirmish escalated quickly. The militia fired 3 shots upon Johnson's party before reaching a truce. The terms of capitulation dictated that both factions stand down and wait for a newly appointed royal governor, Francis Nicholson, to arrive and settle the dispute. The local militia rejected this compromise, being much displeased with Governor Moore, believing he made it up too easy. Facing mutiny, Moore was forced to imprison 2 ringleaders aboard the Phoenix man-of-war to appease his troops. This incident illustrates the stark reality. Political legitimacy did not stem merely from a royal decree. It required the physical backing and continuous approval of an armed local citizenry. The Charlestown standoff proves that colonial governance was highly volatile. Leaders had to manage and suppress internal coups, using local militias to maintain their sovereign control. The final critical piece of functional statehood found in this issue concerns commerce, the absolute lifeblood of the colonies. 53 is a quiet structural shift in the American economy. John Copson announces the opening of an Office of Public Insurance on vessels, goods, and merchandises, located at his house on High Street. Before this, colonial merchants were entirely dependent on London underwriters to insure their voyages and cargo. This map shows the system's inefficiency. A Philadelphia merchant sent a request across the Atlantic, waited weeks for approval in London, then waited for the return paperwork. The paper explicitly calls this transatlantic reliance tedious and troublesome, but even very precarious. Copson's solution was to create a localized syndicate of domestic colonial investors, ensuring the underwriters are persons of undoubted worth and reputation in this city and province. This is a textbook example of financial autonomy. Keeping maritime risk and capital assessment localized within the colony is a fundamental prerequisite for operating as an independent state. Opening Copson's office quietly severed a massive financial tether to Britain. It gave Philadelphia merchants direct control over their own economic destinies. Viewed in their entirety, these pages provide a unified historical dataset of 18th century statecraft. Within a single week in the spring of 1721, we see governors mapping continental divides, acting executives suppressing armed rebellions, and merchants building independent financial markets. This record contradicts the simplistic narrative that colonists were passive subjects, sitting idle until the king gave an order. Negotiating borders, managing domestic military force, and underwriting a local economy are the core pillars of an active, functioning statehood. This map outlines the colonial borders in 1763. The formal Declaration of Independence years later was the culmination of a localized, structural power that had already been built and rigorously tested for decades. This highlights the value of reading primary sources like the Mercury. The raw facts are useful, but the geopolitical reality of the era is often hidden in plain sight within the margins.
The Daily Dispatch, history in print, no modern gloss.